Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. It's the 17th of April and I'm Brian Fernandez with our guest today, Kian Soon, CEO of Astral Asset Management, coming to us out of Singapore. Kian Soon, it's great to be back and great to be speaking to you again.
Good afternoon.
Now, Kian Soon, before we get your insights, let's take a look and see how markets across the region have performed in the first half of the day. We start with the Straits Times Index, where you're at. The STI is up 0.49%. The KLCI, where I'm at in Malaysia, is down 0.08%. Shanghai is up 1.24%. The ASX All Ordinaries is up 0.16%. But then the Nikkei 225 is in negative territory. It's at 0.38%. The Hang Seng is down 0.22%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is down 0.02%. Kian Soon, your view on market performance in the first half of the day?
I think it's a mixed bag, as we can see. And I would say the flavor of this week is actually market volatility that affects a lot of the indices as well as the performance of regional markets.
Now, going on that theme, obviously, market volatility, one of the key criteria or causes of it has been geopolitical tensions. How do you see that panning out, especially with implications on energy prices and commodities?
I think as we can see over the weekends, one of the key development is the Israel-Iran military conflict. Which actually creates a lot of fear and geopolitical tensions, as there's a concern that this will spread out to a regional conflict in the Middle East, and that's what most countries or not everyone don't want to see. So there is a lot of volatility, and the implications for such a volatility and uncertainties is definitely on oil prices. Which we are already very worried about, oil prices going to hit above 100. And at the same time, the commodity prices are also on the rise, as we have seen that gold prices have hit a record high, as well as some of the soft commodities, and not as a result of a military conflict, but as a result of, the uncertain weather patterns reaching record high, like the cocoa and some of the crop prices.
So this then obviously doesn't help the battle against inflation. And you're seeing that overnight, Governor Powell basically talked about a lack of further progress so far this year on returning to the 2% inflation goal. Now, what are your thoughts on this? And is basically a rate cut in the first half of the year off the cards now?
I think, Brian, we have been talking about this show and my positioning on this, how sticky the inflation would be. And as recent as 3 months ago, I think the whole market's expectation is there's going to be 6 rate cuts, and the inflation will be within control, etc. And therefore that leads to a euphoria of markets performance towards end of the year. But as we've seen from the first 3 months, and given that last week was the announcement of the March inflation number in the United States, it's quite clear that inflation is still not down to the 2% level, which is the target of Fed. In fact, inflation for the first 3 months stays above 3%. And like what we mentioned, the various drivers that will potentially cause inflation to be even higher and hotter, it's very unlikely you're going to see any rate cuts in the first half of the year. And then even for the second half of the year, initially the discussion was going to be a June rate cut, but I think the markets have to be practical and accept that the rate cut might come only in the third or fourth quarter, if any, and only if inflation numbers comes within control. Just to add, the United States economy numbers have been very robust, so there's no key drivers to push the Fed to rush into cutting interest rates, in order to boost the economy.
And so then, Kian Soon, all this points to continued strength of the US dollar vis-a-vis the yen and also, of course, Southeast Asian currencies.
That's correct. As you have seen that, with the strength of, the US dollars as a result of, low expectations of any rate reductions, there is a differential of interest rates, right, across currencies. And what we are seeing is yen has hit an all-time low, and there's discussions about yen going towards the 160 yen per US dollar level. You have seen that the regional countries have also starts to have a weaker currency relative to US dollars for very obvious reasons. I think there are implications here is for export players or for players who are doing imports, they're for traders, as well as the various implications of your cost of funding, depending on whether you are funded by the US dollars as well as the local currencies.
Now, Kian Soon, I want to take a view closer to home then in terms of business sentiment. So there's a lot of moving parts here. We've got the Fed on one hand, the robust US economy, the exceptional story around the US economy, but then we've got geopolitical tensions, we've got weaknesses in most major economies around the world. This morning, close to home, we just had Singapore's non-oil domestic exports plunging 20% for March. And we had also, on the flip side, Japan obviously having good trade numbers, primarily due, of course, to the weak yen. What are we seeing in terms of trade sentiment around trade and the economy in our part of the world?
I think in our part of the world, the trade and import-export numbers has been volatile as well. We see that across for China, Singapore, Japan, and this could be as a result of first demand supply. I think a huge part of Asia goods are being shipped to Europe and United States, and that demand will continue to be a strong driver in terms of trade performance we are seeing in Asia, in particular Southeast Asia, because a lot of goods are exported either to United States or to our northern neighbor in China. So that could create a kind of volatility. I think the other one is really the sentiments on the ground, right? Where you have the traders and businessmen. How do they really feel? And it turns out that 2024 is an extremely difficult year to assess such sentiments, where on certain months people are feeling very positive about it, when there are positive indicators of economic growth, in particular in the key two biggest nations, United States and China. On the other hand, they are also downplayed by the developments of the military conflicts in Middle East as well as Russia, Ukraine. So it's a mixed bag where sentiments change on the ground rather quickly. Everybody is trying to adjust to the geopolitical tensions depending on how they play out for the rest of the year. And not to forget, right, end of the year we actually have an election year for United States. This is also an election year for a lot of countries. At the current moment, I think India is going to have its election soon. So a lot of the observers as well as markets are looking out for the key changes in such elections, and if the policies, right, for example, trade policies will definitely take a major U-turn if Trump becomes president. So this is all the uncertainties that we're going to face for 2024.
Now, one more question. Even though we're just running out of time, we've had a leadership transition in Singapore. What are the implications for Singapore?
I think the best leadership transition is a low profile one, where everybody talks about it. And you have it, and there's no major developments, and that's what Singapore aspire to achieve, except for the fact that on the May 15, the date itself, a lot of our lottery numbers have already been fully sold, but I think that's the only excitement in town. We're not going to see any major events in this transition because it has been well communicated. This transition has been planned. There are no surprises. And then the new cabinet and the new prime minister will take over, and probably that will give them ample time to prepare for the next general election in Singapore.
On that note, Kian Soon, thanks again for coming on the show, and thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Now, we've been speaking to Kian Soon, CEO of Astral Asset Management. And this has been BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out the show on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.